Hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. I apologize. The thumbnail's wrong. Because I felt we could talk about other threat vectors other than hit points. This isn't specifically the OSR, old school gaming, and especially other games beyond Dungeons and Dragons, but I thought we would talk about other threat vectors, and I'll explain what the threat vectors are. In many games, we have, especially with the mechanics involved, there are threats to player characters, things that they possess, usually in this form of some kind of physical prowess, whether that are wound levels, hit points, stress, physique. I'm trying to think of other terminology I've seen in older role-playing games, stamina and things like that. But one of the limitations sometimes is that when it comes to mechanics, is that we can get a little bit myopic, focused on, because this mechanical feature is highlighted, that over time, other designers, other creators, maybe that game is passed down through generations, essentially other editions, that the sexy part, the thing that draws people's attention to the game, may be focused on that singular mechanism. And in many older games, those threat levels were spread out. And in many ways, it meant the players had to consider various other threat vectors coming at them, and therefore they could never what we consider min-maxing or power game a singular threat vector. Instead, they had to worry about being assaulted on different fronts. So an example of this isn't not necessarily rules light, but there are many fans of Call of Cthulhu, and this is a perfect example of having a game in which it's not just about your physical prowess, which in Call of Cthulhu, characters are pretty damn fragile, but it's also the threats to your sanity, and that is very difficult to fight off, very difficult to defend against in a game in which those threats can come at you by simply opening a door or a book or being exposed to a specific type of threat. So anyway, let's break down some of these things that can be threatened with player characters and within the game world, and relate this back to the OSR. And maybe at the end, I'll talk about a really insightful comment that someone posted. And then clarify. Have a healthy back and forth, because I think the comment was insightful, and I think we could even do a broader scope of it, maybe tomorrow. I don't know. Anyway, so threat vectors. All right, so of course we have, in many games, we have combat, and combat seems to be not necessarily in indie games, but combat seems to be the focus thing on a lot of adventure games, and especially fantasy and such. And sometimes all of the harm that can come to the player characters can be disseminated into a combat styled threat. And I think, unfortunately, what happens is characters that are not designed that way in many of these games tend not to rise to the top and not to be very effective. So I would suggest that if you have the capability, either modifying your game, or that game has other physical threats, meaning like exhaustion, whether it's suffocation, poison, diseases, other kinds of threats, burning, freezing, dehydration, uh, resource management, or something like that, to try to enhance or even bring up those other threats so that players are not hyper focused on one method of being able to survive. Also, when it comes to lack of resources, and mind you, I am not a fan of like counting ounces and pounds and kilograms on player characters' backs. I'm not a fan of that, but there's so many other options in terms of handling character resources. I'm sure you can find something out there that's uh, more appropriate to your gaming style, whether you're using slots, like, hey, a backpack can hold 10 slots or something, or you can hold as many things as your constitution or stamina score, or whatever the case may be. Now, another way, but there's other threat vectors that many times are downplayed, and you're going to really need to discuss this with your players. Either the game includes this in there and it's not necessarily a Dungeons and Dragons clone, or you want to include other things in the game in which you want your players to be responsible for. And this can be things like honor systems, reputation, being responsible for a community of some sort, whether the players are nomadic and they have to worry about their traveling companions, or they are responsible for a village, a city-state, a kingdom of some sort. Players may also have, maybe they are underground agents, black market, criminals, members of a rebellion or some sort, and there may be some kind of reputational clout that they need to maintain in order for the players to keep progressing forward. And I'm going to bring up Blades in the Dark yet again. Blades in the Dark has a reputation system in which the better reputation you have with some gangs or the authorities, the worse reputation you have with other factions and gangs and other members that are important in the city of Duskwall. And so and that game is, players absolutely play criminals. They do heists. It could be assassins, dealers of black market information or objects or things like that. And so by having when I say other threat factors, what I mean, and this is coming from a dungeon master, game master, is having the ability to threaten your players with losses, and the players having to juggle those losses. One thing I really appreciate in Blades in the Dark is they have a rest and recovery system that doesn't involve resting. In other words, they have a system in which you can recover essentially your hit points or your stress levels by wiping away those negative effects, by engaging in your vices. And I wish other games really embrace this, because it is not, it's very narrative, so you really have to understand your game and how your game operates. But it's less about like taking a nap and falling asleep and recovering, which makes a lot of sense, but it's more about pulling the players out of their turtle shell and protecting themselves and getting them out into the world in order for them to recover their willpower, their drive, their chutzpah, whatever it is in the world. And something like if players are responsible for a noble family, or they're responsible for the safety and security of a community, or protecting valuable goods and services on a trade route or something like that. And therefore the players could be badasses, to be honest with you, but the people they're protecting could be very fragile, and they may have to juggle the players may have to juggle their responses. Do we leave the community, leaving them undefended, according to the player characters, undefended, and go out to stop a greater threat or evil, or do we stay at home? Now, mind you, this kind of concept would take a little bit of juggling, but I think if you get players that have a desire to establish roots somewhere, bring in player characters' backgrounds, bring in their storylines, attach NPCs to many of the player characters, I think you can get pretty far. Something else I think that is that is an example of the OSR, and you see it being wiped away and then being brought back again. It's like cyclical game design nature, is the idea of milestones. And in the ye olden days, a lot of these milestones were built into character classes and features and like a meta background. For example, for druids, there was a point at which druids would have to return back to the druidic circle they came from and have a physical battle with other druids of higher levels, and to the point where they even said that in order to gain when your characters go into like double digits, meaning like 11th, 12th, 13th level and above, that there was only one druid of that level, and you had to confront that specific druid in order to even gain another level. I'm not suggesting that every game do this for every player character, but what I mean is wizards needing to find a library, or martial characters needing to find a mentor, or any types of in-world features in which characters must it's not just about them existing in a void by themselves on their own private island and advancing, but that the world around them, they must care for and be careful about the world around them, and also that the world around them could be shifting a bit. And for example, weather events might prevent a wizard from returning back to the town that has that very expansive library that they've been able to study at, or an experienced mentor that has been training one of the player characters is aging, or was injured, or robbed, or recruited into a great war, and now the player's like, okay, look, I'm a little selfish. I kind of want to gain some extra. I've got these extra bennies or points or experience or whatever the case may be to advance my character. So I need to sidle up next to my mentor, but my mentor now has just been recruited into this battle. And so now I need to protect them so they can teach me, so I can advance my character. Having those extra ties, and talking about ties, even incorporating characters, there's the proverbial murder hobo, right? Where a character has no ties to a community, they have no family, of course they're an orphan, but it actually makes it more interesting for role-playing games if characters have family, friends, loved ones, colleagues, old classmates, individuals they ran with when they were a street urchin, even members that they may not even have a really good connection with, but they are all part of the same faction, whether it's like religion or politics, military, educational systems, and things like that. Maybe even strange bedfellows, like all the players are, maybe one or more of the characters are members of a faction that have been thrown together, like a cell from a rebel force or something, trying to take down a great empire, and now the players have to like deal with these other personalities that they're not used to. And it could be that the players are, while they may not like these individuals, this makes good adversaries, they also need to care for them. And when I say care for, I don't necessarily mean like raising like children or like dependents, but what I mean is as the cycle of adventure grows in your game, meaning there's the outward journey and then there's the inward reflection, which here on this channel we refer to as the labyrinth. So as these journeys and labyrinths go back and forth, the journey meaning external exploration, physically traveling and even mentally traveling outwards in the world, and then the labyrinth is internal, internal culture, internal psychological issues, family drama, and things like that. And as those things go back and forth, we can start adding and subtracting to those threat vectors. Now, mechanically speaking, there are games that put a mechanical value to your connections. For example, I remember playing a superhero game, and in the superhero game, your I can't remember. I'm trying to remember the name of the game. It was a Powered by the Apocalypse game, and I want to say it was like Truth and Justice or something like that. I can't remember the exact title of it. It's been a while, but I do remember that you gained and could spend points based on your. I think they were either called anchors or connections, maybe threads or something. But anyway, the point of it is that you could add some. If you're hacking your own game, you could have some kind of numerical value. If your game doesn't need to be hacked and it already has this in there, express to the players like, hey, listen, you've got 10 points, as an example, to spread between people, places, and things your character is connected to. The real one that comes to mind for me is Wraith the Oblivion is another game where you play a ghost, or technically a wraith, and you attach numbers to people, places, and things that keep you in this world. And so much like in fantasy, maybe players being part of a nomadic group or a war band or a political faction or a noble family or a religious institution, or you can go on and on and on. Over time, maybe those numbers, which add to the player character's capabilities or ability to recover or represent some kind of goal in which to raise those numerical values up or change those numerical values so that they can operate individually on their own. It could be that the players are adventuring not just for themselves, but for air quotes, a greater good. And much of the going into dungeons to beat people up and take their gold from the OSR was about that. Now, mind you, over time, it kind of did devolve into kicking down doors and taking other people's stuff. But the real intention of it was that all that stuff that was taken and all those places that all those monsters lived in belonged to humanity in the first place, and that the players are existing in a darker age where the great technologies and cities and knowledge and expansive nature of humanity has shrunk, and now we are trying to collect that back. And yeah, that gold and those items and those crypts and those forgotten cities weren't there by accident. They were real places people lived, and they were overrun by the goblinoids, by the undead, by evil necromancers and such, and humanity was trying to fight that back. So the physical nature of exploration, getting to these places, many times while there was no numerical value, it was very important for players to get as much knowledge as they could about the ancient crypt that was taken over by the undead and the Council of Seven Wizards that took it over, or rumors about the ancient artifact, talking about the number 7, the classic rod of 7 parts that would be combined together to fight against an even greater threat on the horizon or something like that. And just being able to have these other things to take care of. Players love having physical things to take care of. A warship, a spaceship, a giant robot. the physical nature of a thing, building it together. Something that's very common and can get players very invested in Blades in the Dark is that they have a separate character sheet just for your gang. What kind of gang do your players command? What is their personality? Some of their capabilities that the players can pull from, and it's like its own character that spreads to the other player characters that gives them certain abilities. Like, for example, if you make a gang that's about like pickpocketing and fleecing, maybe the gang is very good at forging documents, and so each of the other player characters can go to their own gang to get forged documents or something of that nature. And that may be something you might want to include in a game if you're hacking, or the game has something like this, in which, hey, we're your typical adventuring party, but there's a bunch of us that are traveling along with us, or maybe the players are trying to defend literally the keep on the Borderlands, and not only you have the drama, but also maybe like the keep on the Borderlands is like a rated 3, and the players need to get it to a rating 10 so that they can take care of themselves. So maybe the players can move on and have a substantial and self-protected keep, so that the players can leave this place and go like, listen, we want to adventure further away, but they're not really defending themselves. So hey, players, let's work together to hire or recruit enough warriors or city guards, or train them or something, so they can protect this keep, get it up to a rating of 10, so that we can move on and go to another place. I think that can be kind of cool to include, like I said, about threat vectors and such. Now, one type of vector that may be a bit difficult to incorporate, even though a lot of indie games really embrace this, is not really having hit points or wound levels per se, but more about psychological influences. Meaning, like I mentioned Call of Cthulhu with Sanity, there are some games that are about emotional connections between family and friends. It could be there's a Powered by the Apocalypse game called Thirsty Sword Lesbians, and it is about overcoming things like fear and guilt and prejudice and narcissism and jealousies and things like that. There's other games, I believe Masks does this, and there's a teenage drama game based around Monster Hearts. There we go. Is another game where it's similar in terms of being pulled in and tied to other NPCs and even other player characters, and being able to have different kinds of things to threaten the player characters' lives, and gives game masters and dungeon masters, storytellers, etc., more opportunity to tell different stories and to have the players overcome challenges that may not seem as on its surface may not seem as threatening, but in the wider scope of tabletop role-playing games, maybe battles, you're rolling combat and initiative, and combat rounds may be very short, but these other threats may be looming on the horizon, and like clocks, or in my own game, orbits, and other things, these things might be ticking time bombs. I believe in other games, I'm going to mix the two games up. Dungeon World and Powered by the Apocalypse have icons and fronts. They both operate very similarly, in the sense of icons and fronts are like the personification of threats and changes on the horizon attached to the player characters. So again, characters may be members of a certain type of faction, or like I said, religion, or criminal organization, or maybe the players aren't even involved with any of that, but they understand that when one group or one influence starts to decrease, that the other one starts to increase. Like a power vacuum, if the players defeat a great evil, there may be a power vacuum for the player characters to deal with. And it might not be as simple as going up to things and hitting things about the neck and shoulders and punching people in the throat. Maybe it's about trade negotiations, or giving NPCs access to resources, or just promises of safe travel and things like that. And that you can grow your world, maybe giving the player characters more responsibilities, or maybe the players really chafe at being held down with a lot of responsibility, and even that itself may be the threat. Like, maybe there's one or more organizations where they're looking to the players like, listen, we need your leadership, and the PCs are like, I don't want to be a leader. I'm on my own. I'm literally solo, flying through space on my own. I don't want to be attached to you guys and what you're dealing with. And even that choice itself, maybe there's guilt involved when the players turn their back on a community that really needs them, or maybe there are loved ones or young people that are looking up to the player characters, trying to emulate their behavior and their successes, but they're not getting as much success as our badass heroes, right? Big damn heroes are greater than the threats that are around them. And especially if you feel like, as a game master, dungeon master, flame tender, storyteller, warden, whatever the case may be, and you feel like it's very difficult to threaten them physically, combat wise, having them have to juggle these other contextualized threats may be more important. And even if we stick with the physical threats, initiative, combat, things like that, building in other context is a huge thing that I like to be a proponent of. Meaning, like, the monsters, are they just trying to kill the players, or are they trying to steal something or take something away from them? If the players are crossing yet again the accursed desert for like the 28th time or something, I've talked about the accursed desert, and the players are carrying, they're in a caravan and they have lots of water and food, and the marauding raiders are trying to steal their food and water. That can be, the push and pull, the literal tug of war that may happen in trying to scrape back those resources. Even if the players aren't going to like dehydrate and starve out there in the accursed desert, maybe the nomadic people they're protecting will. So here comes the cycle of adventure, right? The players leave the nomadic tribe to go back to get their water and foodstuffs, to return it back to the people they're protecting, and then that may lead to other things. Maybe the raiders themselves are, they're cannon fodder, right? They're not that important, but maybe it leads the players into inadvertently into greater plots. And hit points don't have anything to do with it if your game is about literally tracking people down to steal back their resources, steal the resources back from the resources that maybe the PC stole from someplace else, or acquired from someplace like an oasis, or a hidden stream of pure water, or an individual who can, through divine intervention, create food and or water for the player characters to acquire. And lastly, I would say, because I don't know, this stream didn't go out, I don't think, the way it was intended to. So anyway, lastly, when it comes to threat vectors, like I said, you can make this very mechanical, adding like numerical values or numbers to what the players need to take care of, whether they are family, friends, people, places, things. I think if you're going with places and things instead of people, personalities, you can attach a lot of importance to those things, whether they are small items like a diary or a medallion, a blade, or article of clothing, and that item itself may have the care for that item may be very important. Um, you could get a little meta with this, like for example, like Captain America always seems to get his shield back, even if it is lost, stolen, seems to be forgot. He seems to get it back. The same may go for important items that the character may have, like a diary, and you may want to say like, okay, yeah, I'm saying your diary may fall into the fire, but is it really going to burn up? Probably not, um, because it's important for the character to have it, and give the players the option themselves to destroy such an item or whatever, instead of like GM fiat and just going like, okay, it survived again, and it survived again, and it survived again. You might want to be a little bit careful with using that when it comes to like personal objects. But I don't think too many games, like campaigns, run long enough for that to become too much of an issue, where where you can get a little bit of the eye roll, like, really? Like, literally you dropped it over a fire and somehow it didn't burn up in the fire, but it can be fun too to have like that same diary stolen by someone who really doesn't even understand its importance, or its importance, its value isn't as important to outsiders as it would be for the player character. I'm looking at you, Indiana Jones, and your hat and whip, right? No one really cares about the hat, but getting the hat back and the importance of that. Or we've seen many war movies where you have the classic photograph of someone's beloved back at home or something, or family, and they take the photograph and they tuck it into a corner somewhere, and it rejuvenates them. And the same could be in a game, like maybe the psychological horrors, or the the old Vampire the Masquerade. I'm not certain about the second edition, but I remember in the original Vampire the Masquerade, players were vampires that were part of clans, and you got some of your capabilities from the blood of your clan. Now, it didn't mean that as a player you only could be a part of that clan, but it did mean that intrinsically, by blood, you belonged, or at least the clan thought you belonged to them. And the push and pull of players wanting to be independent, and yet being pushed into or forced into a situation where if you're not for us, you're against us. And other NPCs going, well, you're a member of that other clan, you can't be a member of us because you're a member of them. And there was a lot of that, at least in the first iterations of Vampire the Masquerade, and it was like high school. I described it as like immortal high school, where you had like the jocks and the emos and the goths and the geeks and the drama students and the popular kids and all that kind of stuff, the newbies and whatnot, the rich kid, poor kid situation. And even though the kids themselves were individuals, it was very easy for high school students to put people into different categories. And of course, we are tribal in nature as humans, so we like to be in groups that accept us, and we like to pick groups that we're against, so we have an easy method of disseminating who is our friend, who are allies and enemies. And the same could be done in tabletop role-playing games. And the OSR, old school gaming, did a lot of what I was talking about, but maybe not so overtly. Meaning, like, if you were playing Fight Tour in old school Dungeons and Dragons, you were expected to, at a certain point, create a fort and gain followers and such, and that became your new vector of threat when the game master could threaten your protectorate, not necessarily you as a player character. The game master could threaten a trade route, or could threaten you with famine or disease, or economic instability, or new lines being drawn as political machinations happen, and lines that, borders between different nations start to shift, and things like that. Promises are made, and many times when in the OSR, a lot of that stuff has been forgotten and then repackaged as like, oh, we're going from just being individual adventurers to like king making, or some names that come to mind are like Birthright and Kingmaker, and there's another one. Matt Colville just released 2 books about it. Something in Warfare. Strongholds and Followers, and then something in Warfare. Hey, oh wow. I'm already wrong. Wow. Since you're wrong says, if you were doing D&D, if you were doing old D&D right, you needed to bring a caravan with you to each dungeon, so you didn't have to go back to town. Yeah. And you know what? There, even in modern games, like, sometimes we have like fun with like, okay, if you go to the dungeon, where do you leave your horse and stuff? That's why you came with the caravan. Although I still say you can do open air dungeons, right? Overland travel is just a dungeon without a roof on top of it, but that's just me. But that was the case, right? You had to go with there's 5 different ones: followers, henchmen, retainers, and there's 2 more. I can't remember. Yep. You needed to bring a blacksmith and a appraiser, other support. Hell yeah, you sure did. And heck, if beyond the classic, like, we need a healer, you also had to bring like cartographers and things like that. And a lot of those characters became new PCs when other NPCs died off, because characters were so fragile back then. But this is just to say that the whole idea of having TPKs all the time, and total party kills in the OSR, there were ways we avoided it. Now, whether we knew it or not is a different story, but many times it was just threatening other parts of a character's life, rather than just roll for initiative, combat, there's a random monster around the corner. It was about a player would find the deed to land, and they would own that land, and now the land itself is being threatened. And it's not about the players going out and fighting the monsters. It's about, okay, my character now owns land, and I need to defend it. So now we need to, train up the villagers or something. They're looking for, big damn heroes to lead them and whatnot. And then the players are like, okay, well, we want to go into another dungeon, but we want to keep our land safe. So let's spend 3 weeks training up some of the strongest members of the village. And then game master's like, oh shoot, I didn't even prep for this. Let me get some random names and some random personality traits, so I break out my D&D notes, and then so then that becomes a new way for the players to not just engage in the game, but also players are pretty fragile there. So yeah, so you're wrong, which means I guess I'm wrong, or are you wrong if I say you're wrong? Anyway, mentions that if you're doing it right, you need to bring a caravan, and so yeah, a lot of those threats came from places without needing to roll initiative and roll for combat and what's your armor class. Like, a lot of that stuff was about, hey players, I understand that you're badass big damn heroes. It doesn't matter if you're going through swamps and mountains and stuff. There's nothing that's going to happen to you. But what about your mounts and horses, giant lizards, camels, elephants or whatever. Who takes care of that? How about just even having a nomadic group and having someone who watches everyone, or even keep the morale up of the group? There were we had reaction rolls. A lot of times it was like reaction rolls and loyalty rolls to see like how loyal are those henchmen and retainers and followers that you have with you before they start like siphoning off the little silver and coppers that are the forgotten coins that after you pulled all those tens of thousands of gold items out of the dungeon, and then you come back to town and like, wait a minute, how did we lose like 1,737 pieces of coin? And like, well, they don't like you. That was so funny. Yeah. I'm old and out there too, man. I'm old and out there too. Also, again, this wasn't really a part of the OSR that was really influenced, but there was a bit of a legacy concept of old gaming, meaning like you were expected in many ways to retire your character. Like there was solo games. I was thinking about trying to get into a lot of promote a number of solo games on this channel, but yeah, there were a lot of these like your character was supposed to retire, and one or more of your followers or retainers or henchmen or something, you would end up taking over and make that your new character. And then the blacksmith, the noble, the barrister, the constable, seneschal. I'm trying to think of a number of names of different people that would handle like a keep or a land or something. That would actually end up becoming your old retired character became the leadership, and then your new character would travel out from beyond that. So yeah, you're wrong, since I mostly play mostly solo role play these days, which is cool. There's a ton of them out there. Ironsworn and Star Forged, and what I did on this show, Substratum Protocol. I'm trying to think of something that I've actually laid my hands on and seen. There's so many others, and Shadow Dark has a solo version of it, as well as Morkborg itself. There's so many out there. You guys do searches on that. But anyway, I'm not going to hold you too long. Normally I go beyond an hour, but I just thought that it would be kind of cool to talk about and embrace other threat vectors other than just rolling initiative and worrying about hit points, especially if the players have to balance. I didn't even really delve into like honor, justice, Bushido Code style games as well, where you must keep track of your loyalty and honor and honesty and maybe even religious or faith or zealotry levels compared to your own personal goals, and those attached to your faction. There's so many of these things out there, whether it's in your game already and people just kind of ignore it. Because Dungeons & Dragons, if you original 2014 in the Dungeon Master's Guide has an honor system and reputation system in it. Just look to that page, you can use it, and monitoring those numerical values could go counter to the player character's capabilities. And then that means hard decisions, and hard decisions are great to put in players' hands. It's like, yes, we have the power to walk next door to our next door kingdom and beat ass, but that's going to reduce our reputation or honor system, because that's not how you're supposed to get things done. But it would be an easy thing for the players to do it. So do they do such a thing or not? It's like, hey, I'm a big damn wizard. I can just teleport into the castle, cast a fireball, and completely just eliminate the entire noble family. But is that the smart thing to do? Looking at you, House of the Dragon, and Rhaenys, who in the first season, erupts out of the floor of the Hall of Dragons or whatever, gets everybody scared, breathes, has her dragon roar in the face of the noble family, and does not breathe fire. And everyone was like, why didn't she kill them all? And they don't really delve on this in the show, but there's a thing called being a kinslayer, and you never want to be a kinslayer. Kinslaying, slaying someone of your own blood, is considered to be not just not very noble, which there's not too many noble people in House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones, but it's considered to be a sin that it follows you. It's an arcane mark against you and your legacy, and so most people are not to do that. Don't do that. So they use machinations to get other people to slay their own families, which sounds like a loophole. It's a psychological loophole, but whatever. Yeah. Euro says there are many ways to do it. The way I do is random generators and a mix of board gaming and journaling. That's sweet. We don't really haven't talked about like Oracle, like random generators, Oracle systems. There are people who've put out Oracle systems so that you can play other role-playing games and journaling games. Journaling is that a verb? Using games where you make a journal of the things that happen. Basically a yeah, kinslaying a problem in Game of Thrones. I know. You're like, wait, what? I'm sure when they were talking about the show, in the books, I've tried my hand at listening to a number of the books. They do mention a lot about kinslaying, and I listen to podcasts and things. They talk about kinslaying is terrible. You don't want to do it. Yeah, they're doing it all the time. Right. Which is a little bit ironic. It's like, wait a minute, aren't they all killing their own family all the time? Well, yes, but they're also getting other people to do it for them too. So yeah, if you're a second born, yeah, you're gunning for top spot all the time. It's just those a lot of those storylines. The second borns are always gunning for top spot, and they're like, hey, I'm not going to kill you, but if something happens, well, maybe I'll just look the other way. But anyway, guys, thank you very much for being part of the show. I really appreciate it. The thumbnail's wrong. I'm going to end up having to change it after the show ends. So apologize for that. I don't know. We'll figure some other stuff out. Oh, I did want to talk about the comment at the end. Let's see if I can pull this up here. Please let me be able to bring this up in a timely manner. Where is my YouTube studio? Let's go to the comment section. Sorry. Because I think it's insightful. It's, I guess somebody could consider it to be a little bit negative. Okay, so this was a comment made by the Shadow Cult, and says, this was about yesterday, talking about like rules light systems and how in the OSR and rules light systems that it's a collaborative consensus in terms of how the rules operate rather than a concrete method. And I'm not against rules complexity. I'm just saying, I'm talking about why it is that it's a big draw for rules light, and why there's this like cyclical thing of going back to rules light. But anyway, the comment says, and I know there's only so many characters you can write in. It says you're describing your gamer self as the exact same as the person you disregard. Just on the opposite side, taking player agency away from their mechanical choices is as bad as taking it away from their theoretical ones. And I think that's a good point, right? Because in a lot of times, a lot of times when you, let me see if I can actually, is there a way to, can I copy and paste? Ooh, yeah, let's do that. Let's copy and paste it, so everyone can see this. And let me see, copy, I'll put it in the chat. Let's see if I can, oops, I accidentally added here. So, and I think the part that comes from why this was a comment by this person, and I'm trying to extrapolate this from the Shadow Cult individual that mentioned this, is that it's not necessarily about the dungeon master taking away a choice or a player agency from the player. It's more collaborative. Now, yes, the dungeon master, game master, whoever you're playing with, has the final say, but that's in a wider ranging effect of needing to have more rules. Some players feel like, oh, the minute I want to do something, the dungeon master is going to tell me no, and just come up with their own rule or ruling or something that's going to go counter to what my specific desires are. And I want to propose that this is more holistic. It's not just about yourself, but everyone. So, for example, if you as a player are constantly being thwarted by the choices of the other players at the group, including the dungeon master saying, no, you shouldn't, can't, you're being given a lot of negatives, right? No, can't, shouldn't, won't work, doesn't fit, blah, blah, blah. Then I would say either that you're playing with the wrong group, or your intentions are not coming across very well with the people that you're not aligned with the people you're playing with. So me as a dungeon master, I wouldn't just look at you and go, hell no. It's consensus, right? Hey, listening to everyone all at the same time and going, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And also being a fan of the players, right? Like, I think there's a little bit of a disregard for rules-like systems, because it's some people feel that whoever's running the game master, whoever, is in a position to work against the player. And a lot of times when, it's like the game ends when you can't play any longer. We're actually your fan, right? It's not that we want you to fail. It's we want you to succeed. We just want it to be a challenge. So a lot of times, like when, and I get it, because we are individuals. We don't have a hive mind. We aren't, when we sit down to play a game with someone else, we don't link psychically with everyone else. So we don't know what they're thinking, and we don't know if they have our best interest in mind. And that's where I say that, from the other episode where I was saying like BS detectors and a-hole filters is like, yes, you will get some pushback sometimes, but the same goes for yourself when working with other people at the same gaming table. If you push back against other people consistently over and over again, then that person's fun ends up dropping down to a numerical value of 0. So again, as a player, yeah, you should be involved in hey, we have a one-off situation here. What's the rule on it? Well, we have first of all, we have a strong engine, whatever that engine is, the mechanics of the game. What's our default mechanic of the game? So you always have that to go with. And then everyone else goes, okay, well, how does this thing work? And then we all just agree on how this thing works. Because one person may think, well, if I put my hand up against the wall and I make a hole, what size is that hole? And then if we all agree, or at least we come to a consensus, then that becomes the new rule, in which case, is that like, were you really expecting to always get your way all the time? That's a bit selfish within the context of rules like games. Or are you trying to, we know this happens. Is someone trying to play the game master or dungeon master? Are you trying to get your way because for psychological reasons? Like, hey, and when I say you, I guess it sounds like I'm talking about the Shadow Cult. The person broached the subject. I'm just trying to extrapolate on it. That it's not necessarily between two people. It's about everyone at the table accepting the thing, right? Like maybe because, for example, let's go back to the spell. I put my hand against the wall, can make a hole in stone. Maybe everyone's like, you know what? Maybe we should apply that rule to everything similar to that thing. And so now that consensus becomes a consensus for everything. Hey, I can hold my hand up to a wall of fire. I get to make the same hole in that wall of fire or ice or foliage or whatever, just as the other player character did the same thing. Just as the dungeon master says, great, well, I've got an NPC that, or an enemy that can do the exact same thing. We've made the decision, this is how it works, so this is how it works. So that consensus becomes the world and how it operates. And mind you, you don't have to do this. Yes, you can do it on the fly, but you don't have to. Session 0, hey, let's talk about, hey guys, this game doesn't have a rule for this thing. How do you guys want to do it? Because we're gonna have a game where we're sailing from different archipelagos, and it's a seafaring game, but this game doesn't have heavy duty rules on seafaring. How do you guys want to operate it? And then everyone says, well, we should use blah 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 blah. Okay, great, that's what we're going to do. We're going to use a bunch of D6s, and you got a D6 pool for your sailing craft. Grab your bucket of D6s and roll them or something like that. And as you go through these different storms, you'll lose them, and you have to make repairs to gain more D6. It's that kind of thing. Now, mind you, like I said, most games have a pretty stable engine. If you just follow the engine, fantasy D20, use a D20 plus or minus a couple of modifiers, you're done. Most of the time, 99% of the time, you just default to the engine. There are other things involved in it, like maybe you want to have multiple successes or failures to reach a thing. Usually a 3 strikes rule is pretty good. Like, we are rooftop running and we need to get away from the city guard. Okay, you need to make 3 failures and you're going to be arrested and caught. Okay, great. So we're going to make like dex rolls and acrobatic rolls and run, jump, and parkour our way across the rooftops. But on your 3rd failure, you trip, fall, captured, cornered, whatever the case may be, right? You could do something like that as well. Success fail rates. But anyway, thank you very much for being part of the show. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for, like I said, I want to add more comments and people involved in it. I want to. I could bring in the Discord server, but it can get a bit complicated. I don't know. There are other things to do. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for being part of the show. I'm not going to take up too much more of your time. Thank you very much. Also for just being like brilliant people. And like I said, this isn't about agreements or disagreements. It's about just having an open discussion. I kind of like disagreements because while you don't have to agree with what I have to say, I like to. Long form content allows us to have a longer ability to express ourselves, and I really don't like I really am not a fan of Happy Monday Part 2. Yeah, not really a fan of bite-sized comments and things like that. It's unfortunate because unfortunately that's the way we have to communicate with each other. But oh well. But anyway, guys, thank you very much for being a part of the show. I really appreciate it. Also, 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday for the most part, except for my antics or whatever. But anyway, have a great one. I'll see you tomorrow. Peace and tranquility. Bye.